At 3 a.m., the night sky above Russia's Bryansk region turned white. A silence so deep it felt staged. Then came the roar. Dozens of explosions rolled across the horizon as entire industrial complexes vanished in waves of flame. For months, Ukraine had watched, waited, and planned. Not a random strike, but an execution of patience. This was not revenge. It was a strategy. Because Ukraine knew one truth. If you want to cripple a war machine, you wait for it to show its full strength, and then you cut its heart out. Before we continue into the war rooms and satellite feeds that made this strike legendary, hit subscribe. These are not just explosions. These are lessons in patience, precision, and power. Join us as we uncover how Ukraine turned timing into a weapon and made Russia's pride burn. From the very first drone that fell on Kiev's skyline, Ukrainian planners understood that Russia's real weapon wasn't the drone itself, it was the factory. A single drone could be shot down. 100 could be jammed, but a factory once running at full speed could pour out thousands. That was the monster they had to slay. For months, satellite eyes circled Russian territory like hawks. Ukrainian intelligence watched new construction in Bryansk, Yelabuga, and Tatarstan, places where Moscow promised to mass-produce its new generation of kamikaze UAVs. Yet no strike came. Analysts argued, why wait? But the generals were patient. Every delay was a calculation. Inside secure bunkers, strategists used phrases like maximum yield window, meaning the moment when the enemy's investment is highest, its defenses predictable, its pride blinding. Destroying an empty shell would waste a missile. Destroying it at peak production would erase billions and months of momentum. Patience wasn't a weakness. It was the quiet sharpening of the blade. Ukraine's intelligence network became the invisible army. Human agents, satellite contractors, partisans, even railway workers, all feeding fragments into the same digital war brain. The goal: map the entire Russian UAV supply chain. The plan was elegant. Don't bomb every building. Strike the two that make the rest useless. Analysts traced electric consumption patterns, truck routes, even the heat signatures from industrial vents. Inside one massive compound, thermal scans showed the exact hole where composite fuselages were cured. Another building was smaller but busier. It housed the microelectronics for drone guidance systems, smuggled from the black market. By early 2025, Ukraine's map of this facility was more detailed than the Russians' own logistics database. Digital overlays revealed the nerve centers, engine assembly, circuit integration, and final QA bays. Those 3 rooms were the heartbeat of the operation. Without them, no drone would fly. Then came the simulations. Military analysts ran dozens of wargame models. What if we hit the power grid? The coolant systems? The test runway? Each model came back with the same answer. Precision kills power. Don't scorch the earth. Cut the veins. Ukraine now knew where to strike. All that remained was when. Before the first missile ever launched, Ukraine launched confusion. It began with cyber warfare, invisible strikes on factory computers that scrambled production data, delayed shipments, and overloaded accounting systems. Logistics managers received false manifests. Train operators were rerouted into empty depots. To the Russians, it felt like bad luck. To Ukraine, it was the fog before the storm. Then came the feints. Small drone raids struck fuel depots hundreds of kilometers away, diversions designed to pull air defenses outward. Every fake attack was bait, every explosion was misdirection. Behind the curtain, Western satellites tracked the movement of spare parts, electric motors from St. Petersburg, camera sensors from Kazan, and carbon fiber rolls from Moscow. Ukraine knew exactly when the final component shipments reached the UAV plant. That was the moment generals had waited for. The facility had reached maximum yield. Hundreds of UAVs were in final assembly. Dozens more were packed for shipment to Crimea and Belgorod. The heart of Russia's drone empire was beating faster than ever. The countdown began, but this would be no reckless barrage. It would be a choreography of annihilation. It was just past midnight when the order came. In a hardened command trailer near Kharkiv, Ukrainian operators locked in coordinates across multiple sectors. A fleet of long-range kamikaze drones, Storm Shadow missiles, and newly modified Neptunes armed with cluster payloads were launched in silence. Electronic warfare teams jammed enemy radar corridors, creating a hole in Russia's vaunted air defense net. From high above, NATO satellites confirmed the strike package's vector, a precision corridor threading through air defense gaps like a needle through cloth. At 2:48 a.m., the first impacts hit the transformer yard. The entire industrial block plunged into darkness. The second wave came seconds later, slamming into the composite curing hall. The sound was described by witnesses as a metal god screaming. Then came the fireball. Cameras from miles away captured the reflection of an inferno rising into the cloud base. For 6 minutes, nothing could be seen but burning debris and tracer fire from panicked defenders. But Ukraine wasn't done. 2 more missiles streaked in low and fast, skimming treetops before detonating in the electronics hall. The final blow hit the storage hangar where hundreds of finished drones were stacked, ready for deployment. Each exploded like a miniature bomb, setting off a chain reaction that turned the complex into molten wreckage. By dawn, the smoke column was visible from space. Satellite images showed craters where machine shops once stood. Russian emergency services called it an accident. But the truth was undeniable. The empire's mechanical swarm had been gutted. Ukraine didn't just destroy drones, it destroyed time. Russia could rebuild buildings, but it couldn't rebuild months of production. Lost tooling and broken morale as the sun rose. One Ukrainian general reportedly said quietly, "They wanted to flood us with machines. We flooded them with silence." When the fires in Bryansk finally dimmed, what emerged from the smoke wasn't just ruin, it was revelation. Satellite footage confirmed total destruction of the factory's production wing. But deeper analysis revealed something more devastating: the destruction of capability. The Russians had spent nearly 2 years building a vertically integrated manufacturing hub. Engines, guidance assembly, all within one hardened complex. The logic was simple: centralize for efficiency. But centralization is a double-edged sword. It turns efficiency into vulnerability. Ukraine's generals understood that perfectly. The explosion that gutted the motor plant had another effect. It wiped out specialized tooling imported secretly from Iran and China. Machines calibrated to nanometer precision, irreplaceable in months, perhaps years. The guidance circuit division, where technicians hand-soldered microchips into drone flight computers, was annihilated. A single missile strike had erased what Russian engineers called their brain room, and with it, the rhythm of production collapsed. The Russian Ministry of Defense scrambled to claim production would resume shortly, but insiders leaked footage of melted presses and twisted gantries. The heart was gone. Economically, it was a shockwave. Each destroyed drone represented $40,000 to $100,000 in materials and electronics. Each destroyed assembly line represented millions more. More critically, Russia's capacity to mass-produce thousands of UAVs per month, the backbone of its attrition strategy, evaporated overnight. In Kyiv, intelligence analysts quietly celebrated not the explosion, but the timing. This was the exact week Russia was preparing a 1,000 drone saturation offensive on Ukrainian infrastructure. That strike never came. Power plants stayed lit. Radar stations stayed active. For the first time in months, the night sky over Ukraine was clear of swarming engines. War planners call this temporal dominance, the ability not just to win a battle, but to steal time from your enemy. Ukraine had stolen Russia's future before it could arrive. Moscow could not hide its panic. Within hours of the attack, orders flew across ministries: decentralize production, rebuild smaller workshops, disperse operations to rural areas. But decentralization requires stability, and stability was exactly what Ukraine denied. Within weeks, reconnaissance drones spotted convoys of machinery and personnel moving from Bryansk toward new industrial zones in Tatarstan and Udmurtia. Ukraine's intelligence agencies followed every movement. Whenever a new site lit up with infrared emissions, a week later, it would vanish in flame. This was not random retaliation. It was a systematic follow-up interdiction campaign. Kyiv's defense ministry called it the harvest season. Instead of massive airstrikes, Ukraine employed surgical precision. Small teams launched long-range kamikaze drones, homemade cruise missiles, and sabotage operations through deep cover agents. One strike hit a train loaded with imported drone engines from China, detonating near Kazan. Another took out a temporary warehouse where engineers had tried to reassemble production lines using salvaged equipment. Each attack magnified the chaos. Russian technicians, already stretched thin, began refusing assignments in red zones. Insurance companies withdrew coverage for factories near borders. Even suppliers grew hesitant, fearing their shipments would be tracked.
To the outside observer, Russia's drone industry seemed to be adapting, switching to smaller, mobile workshops, shifting some production to Belarus. But behind the illusion of recovery was systemic decay. Quality control plummeted. New drones failed mid-flight. Power supplies overheated. Ukraine's planners understood a deeper principle of modern warfare: don't chase the product, strangle the ecosystem. By continually striking the replacement nodes, Ukraine ensured every attempt at recovery only dug the grave deeper. By late spring, Western analysts noted a sharp 70% drop in Russian UAV sorties across the front. What had once been a nightly terror for Ukrainian civilians was now a rare occurrence. The counterpunch was complete, not through volume, but through persistence. Inside Russia, silence turned to noise. State television aired confident briefings claiming no significant damage, while videos of towering infernos leaked across Telegram. The contrast was grotesque, like a nation trying to smile with half its face burned. The propaganda machine worked overtime. The factory was called a minor facility, an auxiliary depot, an old testing range. But the scale of the fire was impossible to hide. Workers' families began posting obituaries, local mayors offered condolences, and satellite companies sold high-resolution imagery showing miles of charred rubble. The Kremlin faced a psychological crisis. For years, it had promised technological superiority, drone shield that could dominate Ukraine. Now that myth lay in ashes. The destruction wasn't just material, it was ideological. Meanwhile, whispers spread through the corridors of the military-industrial complex. Engineers demanded hazard pay. Factory directors quietly moved families out of target zones. Provincial governors begged Moscow for more air defenses, knowing Ukraine's reach had extended far beyond the front line. And then came the emotional cost. Videos of unemployed factory workers standing before the ruins of their plants circulated online. Their faces were not political, they were human. They had built machines of war, and now stood among their graves. Russian state media cut transmission mid-sentence when an anchor broke composure, muttering, "If they can hit us here, what's left safe?" Behind closed doors, reports to the Kremlin used a word rarely seen since 1943, unrecoverable loss. The empire that built machines to flood its enemy now flooded itself, with grief, doubt, and disbelief. Weeks after the strike, the world began to take notice. Defense analysts called it the most sophisticated interdiction campaign of the war. But for Ukraine, it wasn't about headlines, it was about survival. The skies grew quieter, but the silence felt tense. The victory was surgical, not absolute. Everyone knew Russia would rebuild somewhere, somehow. Yet, for now, Ukraine held the rarest advantage in modern war: breathing room. In the aftermath, Ukrainian soldiers on the front reported fewer night attacks. Air raid sirens became less frequent. The constant buzzing of enemy UAVs, that mechanical whine of death, faded into the wind. Soldiers began to sleep. Civilians began to believe again. In Kiev's command center, a wall-sized map showed red dots fading across the Russian interior, each one a destroyed production node. Beneath it, a handwritten quote from a senior general read, "Machines do not win wars. Men do, if they have the patience to strike once, and strike right." The victory also shifted geopolitics. Western partners, once cautious about long-range strikes, now studied Ukraine's precision campaign as a case study in strategic restraint. Instead of reckless escalation, it was proof that timing, intelligence, and precision could do what brute force could not. But amid triumph, the somber realization remained: peace was not yet earned. War had simply changed tempo. Ukraine had proven that patience could destroy an empire's momentum, but even victory demanded vigilance. As dawn broke over Kiev, the camera pans to a soldier standing on a ruined bridge, sunlight catching the metal of his helmet. His voice, quiet, breaks the silence. "We waited for them to show their strength. And when they did, we showed them what waiting costs." Fade to black. Ukraine waited for Russian UAV factory to reach full production, then wiped them all. Subscribe for more cinematic war stories revealing the strategy, courage, and sacrifice behind every silent victory.